As promised in the regular T90 rebuild guide video, I promised that I would also do a video on the Sideshift. Well, this is our Sideshift transmission. It was given to us courtesy of Chris McKay, and yeah, it was in pretty bad shape, and but we are going to be able to use it. We're going to hopefully rebuild this thing. We got to get it apart, but this is the what we're going to be looking at here. Most of the internals are not going to be usable, but these gears are just completely trashed. But I am going to put new gears in here. I've got them, and so this is going to be, we're not going to do the whole rebuild. We're only going to do the dismantle portion as to how to get the shift forks out, and then we're going to go about putting it all back together, or that portion of it back together with the shift fork, so that you know how to go about doing that. Aside from that, everything else is going to be the same as the regular T90, so I'm only going to cover the parts that are different. We're going to start this off by removing the bearing retainer, the front bearing retainer. With the bolts removed from the main front bearing retainer, we can simply, hopefully, pop it off, depending on how corroded it is. Go. With that removed, in the event that you have an oil collector installed, the bolts for it will be right here. This particular model doesn't have the oil collector, but you would remove the bolts from there to slide it back over out of your way. Once you've got that done, you're going to want to move your front bearing forward. Or if it wants to give you grief, you can give it a little extra help. Remember, don't go too far, because it will only go so far before it impacts on your cluster gear. So you only want to move it forward as far as it reasonably goes without jamming up real hard. With that done, we should be ready to remove the main shaft. If you've installed this wire to hold everything in, this is a good time to take it out. Okay, what you're going to want to do is tap your rear bearing retainer out. In the event that it's held in place, by this plate, you want to take it out. With that plate removed, you can now pop out your rear bearing retainer. When you're taking the T90 apart, the one thing that you're going to find, that the Sideshift of T90, the one thing you're going to find that is imperative is that these two pins right here be driven out prior to trying to take out the main shaft and the forks. Alright, so that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to take out these two pins. Okay, so we're going to flip this upside down. These are tapered pins. These are tapered pins. They look like this, and they fit in from the top down. So you're going to have to drive the pins out from the bottom up. You're going to want to make sure that you hold underneath these when you drive these pins out, because I had it sitting up on its side the other day, and I managed to drive one out and shot it all the way across the room. So when you go to take these out, okay, hold underneath them so that when you punch them out, you've got hold of it. Okay, that's the key step, driving out those pins. I have the T90 sitting up on its side so that you can see what's going on, but when you're doing it, you're going to be having it sitting straight up, so you're not going to have to use a board or anything to prop this with. But what you want to do is once you've got those pins driven out, grab hold of the shafts and push them all the way down. Easier said than done. All the way down like that. Now when that happens, the detemp ball that's inside there is going to fly off and stay inside there, or it should stay inside there. That shouldn't be a problem for you. Okay, go ahead and drive the other one all the way down. Alright, with them all the way down, there should now be enough clearance that if you leave this one in neutral and your forward one shifted into second gear, like so. Now, as you pull back, that's going to allow the clutch hub, or clutch sleeve, to slide forward and allow you now to go ahead, take out the rear bearing retainer, take out the first gear, because now you've got enough clearance to get it off of that. Okay, take off that first reverse gear and slide this whole assembly out. If it comes apart, that's okay, because you're planning on rebuilding it. Alright, it's a little more difficult to put back in, not a big deal. Okay, now you can take out your shift forks. Alright, remember this one's going to be going in like this with the 90 degree to the forward edge. Alright, take that shift fork out, take out the second, third shift fork. Take out your aft shift rail, which is for first and reverse gears. Take out your forward shift rail, which is for second and third gear. That leaves your detent pin in the middle, 2 ball bearings, internal spring, and lockout pin. Right here, these components right here are what consist of your lockout to prevent you from going into 2 gears in the transmission at once. Alright? They make this assembly in different lengths. You will have to find out which one you need, and you can usually figure that out by putting this one back in and seeing if you normally the one that's in there to begin with should work, unless you're having a problem with it going in 2 gears at once anyway, in which case odds are pretty good you're going to have to move one size up from whatever this measurement is at least, and work your way from there. Alright, so these are the components of that lockout that you don't want to lose. These are the parts that came out of this T90. I'm going to be going through them to make sure before I toss any out that they're absolutely and completely ruined, like I started to do this one. As you can see, it started looking pretty good as I started cleaning up the gears, but as it went, they became more and more chewed up to where I finally said, you know what, there's not really anything there worth fixing, so that one's going in the trash. And that's what I'll be doing with all of these, going through them. The parts that I really came after, though, was these 2 right here. This one is bad because the threaded portion is broken off of it, so that's not going to do me any good. Fortunately, I had a spare, and this is it. It cleaned up nicely. These 2 are our shifter assemblies. The rest of these parts, they're pretty well toast, but I'm going to be going through them. I always do that. I always take the time to clean them up just to make sure that they really are bad. For those that want to throw them on, you know, they fire them up, open them up and see them all rusty like this, say, hey, go ahead, run them. Hey, you might as well, because, you know, as long as it'll keep going, you might as well keep going. But when your bearings look like these do, where they're all completely pitted and chewed up, when they look like the ones that are in the end of this cluster gear right here, that bearing, I don't care what you do, that bearing's going to fail eventually. So yeah, go ahead and run it. It's not going to make any difference. The internals of that cluster gear are completely screwed over anyway, so it's really not going to make much difference. So go ahead and run it. These parts, fortunately, I've got replacements for everything except for these shift forks. This one I'm going to go ahead and use, even though I consider it a little questionable because of the amount of rust intrusion that happened along this shift fork. I don't know if you can really see it that well in the video, but for the purposes of showing you how to assemble the T90 transmission with the side shift, it's going to work just fine for that. So we're going to go ahead and use these parts. The shift fork's cleaned up real nice on it, except for that one being chewed up. Also, I want to show you like this front bearing. Sorry, this is a half bearing. It is almost completely froze up. It will only turn that far before it jams. One that's like that, you're not going to get much mileage out of it. As for this case, hey, it's looking really good. It cleaned up nicely inside. All the surface areas inside are in really good shape as far as where the thrust washers ride. All those parts look good. Where the shift assemblies are going through, they all checked out good. The only place there's any kind of damage is on the very top of it, where the top plate, if you look at this top plate, it was in really bad condition, but along the edges of this top plate there is some pitting, but there's solid material there still left. So I'm not on this, but on the case, so it looks pretty good. We're going to just make sure to put extra sealant on it when we put it together, but aside from that, it's fine. It's a nice case. It's ready to go. It's important before you try to install your side shift rails and your main shaft to make sure that you have your main gear pilot bearings installed. Alright, this weekend someone built one up and showed me a picture of the parts they had left over, and these pilot bearings were left over. They didn't remember to put them in, or actually the old video didn't show it. So this is a new video we're shooting. I want to make sure that those pilot bearings are installed. If one of them falls down across in there, your main shaft is not going to install all the way. So make sure that those bearings are in good shape. Make sure that they're properly installed before you move on to installing your shift rails.